I didn't realize a secret could sit quietly in your past for 5 years and still have the power to blow up your future in a single screenshot. Yesterday, Matt's sister accidentally let it slip over coffee. Too excited, too careless, smiling like she couldn't keep it inside her chest. "He's going to propose this weekend," she whispered, eyes bright. "On the camping trip. Don't act surprised, okay?" For a few seconds, my whole body forgot how to breathe. Because in the version of my life Matt knows, I'm the girl who messed up in college, partied too hard, lost her scholarship, crawled back home, embarrassed, and then got serious, got sober, got steady, got better. And that version is true. It's just not the whole truth. Matt is religious, not the loud, judging kind, more like the kind that carries gentleness the way some people carry weapons. He reads his grandfather's Bible when he's stressed. He volunteers on weekends. He believes in forgiveness, like it's an action, not a slogan. And I love him for that. But there's one thing I never told him, because I was ashamed, because I was terrified, because I kept thinking the past would stay buried if I didn't touch the ground above it. 5 years ago, when I was broke and numb and desperate to feel like I had any control over my life, I did one day of work I can never take back. An adult film. One time. One decision. One permanent link floating somewhere on the internet like a landmine, waiting for the wrong footstep. Last night, after his sister's confession, I made the mistake of checking. My hands were shaking so hard I mistyped the search twice. But it didn't matter, because it took less than 10 minutes to find it. The thumbnail hit me like a slap. Matt is coming over tonight, and I'm going to tell him everything, before he puts a ring on my finger and calls me his forever. Because the worst kind of betrayal isn't cheating. It's letting the person you love build a future on a truth you refuse to give them. I'm 25 now, but the version of me that made that choice 5 years ago still lives somewhere in my ribcage like a bruise you forget about until someone presses on it. Matt and I have been together almost 3 years. If you asked anyone in our circle, they'd tell you we're the steady couple, the boring couple, the couple who actually talks things out instead of posting cryptic quotes and breaking up every other month. We met at a community event, one of those local fundraisers with folding chairs, cheap lemonade, and people trying a little too hard to look like good humans. I went because a coworker begged me to get out of my apartment and be social. Matt was there because he always shows up for things like that. He was stacking boxes for a youth donation drive like it was the most natural thing in the world. I remember noticing his hands first. Clean nails, calm movements, the kind of hands that look like they don't slam doors. When he introduced himself, his smile was warm, but not performative. He didn't flirt like a game. He asked questions like he genuinely wanted answers. And I hate admitting how rare that felt to me. He told me he was an engineer. I told him I was an administrative assistant at a medical office. He didn't do that thing some men do, where their eyes glaze over if your job title doesn't impress them. He just nodded and said, "That's a hard job. You keep a whole place running." On our third date, we sat in my car outside a tiny Thai restaurant because there was a wait, and we ended up talking longer than we ate. We talked about childhood, about regrets, about who we were trying to become. I told him the clean version of my past. I'd left for college on a partial scholarship, got swallowed by freedom, started partying, let my grades fall apart, lost the scholarship, and eventually dropped out. I told him I'd been depressed, that I'd made stupid choices, that I'd struggled with alcohol for a while. I expected him to flinch. Instead, he said quietly, "Thank you for trusting me with that." Matt grew up in a religious household, church on Sundays, youth group, family dinners, where people pray before they eat. He still attends regularly, but he's never tried to force me into it. He's offered, gently, once or twice, and when I said I respected his faith but didn't share it, he didn't punish me for it. That's the thing about him. He doesn't use belief as a weapon. But it also meant I knew, deep down, what this secret could cost me. What made it worse, what made it almost cruel in a way I couldn't admit out loud, was that Matt and I actually went to the same high school. He was 2 grades ahead of me. He doesn't remember me, I'm sure of it. Back then, I was invisible, quiet. The girl who ate lunch with a book open like it was a shield. Matt was the opposite. Captain of the soccer team, straight-A student, involved in everything. Teachers loved him. Students loved him. The kind of guy people assume will have a clean life because he had a clean reputation. When we started dating, it felt irrelevant, almost silly. and as time passed, it started to feel too late to mention. So I kept it tucked away with the rest of my before life, like a box pushed into the back of a closet. And for a while, that worked, because the life we built together was real. Sunday mornings where he made coffee and I stole his hoodie, weeknight dinners where we planned budgets and laughed at bad reality TV. The way he held my hand when we walked through crowded places, like his body was quietly telling mine, I'm here. We talked about marriage in the abstract, not pressure, not timelines, just a shared direction. And then yesterday, his sister said the word propose like it was sunshine. And suddenly my past didn't feel like a box in the closet anymore. It felt like a live wire under the floorboards. The worst part wasn't the fear that Matt would leave me. It was the fear that if he stayed, without knowing, I would never believe I deserved it. After his sister told me about the proposal, I spent the rest of that day moving through my life like I was underwater. At work, I answered phones on autopilot, scheduled appointments I barely remembered making, smiled at coworkers while my chest felt tight and hollow at the same time. Every ordinary moment felt fraudulent. Because in my head, there was a countdown ticking toward a weekend where a man I love might kneel in front of me, while a version of me he didn't know stood between us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation Matt and I had ever had about honesty, about faith, about building something real. He never said, "Tell me everything." He never demanded a confession. But he lived his life like truth mattered. That made the silence heavier. I kept thinking about the video, how I'd spent years refusing to look for it, pretending that not knowing where it lived meant it couldn't hurt me. But once the word engagement entered the room, avoidance stopped feeling like self-protection and started feeling like deceit. So I did the thing I'd sworn I'd never do. I searched for it. My hands shook so badly I had to sit on the floor with my laptop balanced against the coffee table. I told myself I just needed to know if it still existed, if it had disappeared into the void like so many other things from that time in my life. It hadn't. It took less than 10 minutes. The website looked exactly the same as it had 5 years ago. Cheap layout, bright banners, a kind of emptiness disguised as abundance. And there it was. My face. A name I didn't use anymore. A thumbnail frozen in time, permanently younger and permanently exposed. I closed the browser so fast my screen went dark. Then I ran to the bathroom and threw up until my stomach cramped and my eyes watered. I sat on the tile floor afterward, hugging my knees, feeling that familiar wave of shame I thought I'd outgrown. The voice that whispered, "This is who you really are. This is what you deserve." I hadn't touched alcohol in years. But that night, I opened my cabinet and found an old bottle of vodka shoved so far back it felt like it belonged to someone else. I stared at it for a long time. Then I poured it down the sink. I don't know if that was strength or desperation, but I knew I couldn't walk into that conversation with Matt carrying anything that might blur my judgment or numb my honesty. The next morning, I practiced what I would say while brushing my teeth, then again in the shower, then again while making coffee I didn't drink. Nothing sounded right. Too blunt felt cruel. Too gentle felt dishonest. And underneath all of it was the question I couldn't answer. If he loves me, will this change the way he looks at me forever? Matt texted me that afternoon. "Coming by a little early tonight. Miss you." I stared at my phone until the words blurred. Part of me wanted to wait, to let him propose first, to tell myself I'd earned some security before reopening the past. But I knew, deep down, that starting a marriage with a secret this big would rot it from the inside. So I made a decision. I cleaned my apartment like I was trying to erase fingerprints, threw away the vodka bottle, sat on my couch with my hands folded in my lap, heart hammering so loudly I was sure he'd hear it through the door. When the doorbell rang, I didn't jump. I just closed my eyes and thought, if this is the moment everything changes, let it change because I told the truth. When I opened the door, Matt was standing there with a paper bag from our favorite Thai place, smiling like this was any other Tuesday night. That smile nearly broke me. "Hey," he said softly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "You okay? You sounded off in your texts." I stepped back to let him in, my body moving on instinct while my mind screamed that there was no turning back now. The smell of curry filled my apartment, warm and familiar, completely at odds with the tightness in my chest. "I'm fine," I lied automatically, then corrected myself. "No, I'm not." He paused, setting the food on the coffee table without opening it. He didn't push. He never does. Instead, he sat down beside me on the couch, close enough that I could feel the heat from his arm, but not touching. "What's going on?" he asked. I stared at my hands. They were shaking. For a second, I considered starting with college, with context, with a careful ramp up that might soften the landing. But something in me snapped into clarity. There was no gentle way to do this. I need to tell you something, I said. My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else's throat. And I need you to just let me finish before you respond, please. That got his attention. He nodded once. Okay. I took a breath so deep it hurt. 5 years ago, I began. After I dropped out of college, I was in a really bad place. Financially, emotionally, I was drinking too much. I didn't think I had a future. He stayed silent, watching me. I saw an ad online for modeling work, I continued. The pay was a lot for one day, and I knew what it really was. I wasn't confused. I wasn't tricked. My throat closed, and I had to swallow hard. I did one adult film, one time. I regretted it almost immediately. I've never done anything like it since, but it exists. It's still online. The words hung between us, heavy and unmoving. Matt didn't react right away. He didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. He just sat there, still as stone, his face shifting slowly. Not into anger, but into something like shock layered with pain. I kept talking because silence felt unbearable. I didn't tell you because I was ashamed, because I was scared, because by the time we got serious, it felt too big to bring up out of nowhere. But when your sister told me about the proposal, I realized I couldn't let you make that decision without knowing this about me. My chest tightened. I understand if this changes how you see me. I understand if you need space, or time, or if this is a deal breaker. I just couldn't keep lying by omission. Finally, he stood up. My heart dropped into my stomach. He walked to the window and stared out at the street below, hands resting on the glass, like he needed something solid to hold on to. The seconds stretched so long I lost count. I braced myself for the sound of the door opening. Instead, he spoke quietly. Is there anything else? He asked. Anything like this? Anything major that I don't know? The way he asked wasn't accusatory. It was careful, like he was trying to make sure the ground under his feet was stable before taking another step. No, I said immediately. No, there isn't. He nodded once, then turned back toward me. I need a minute, he said. Can I go to my car and grab something? I nodded, numb. When the door closed behind him, I collapsed forward, elbows on my knees, my breath coming out in shallow bursts. I stared at the untouched food on the table and thought, this is it. This is the moment before my life splits in two. I didn't know how long he was gone, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10. When the door opened again, he wasn't empty-handed. He was holding his grandfather's Bible, the one I'd seen him read when he was overwhelmed, the one he kept in his car like some people keep emergency flares. He sat back down beside me and placed it gently on the table between us. Can I ask you something? He said. I nodded again. Would you pray with me? I blinked. Matt, you know I'm not... I know, he said quickly. I'm not asking you to believe what I believe. I'm asking you to sit with me. That's all. Something cracked open in my chest. So I nodded. We knelt together beside the couch, my knees pressed into the carpet. His shoulder brushed mine, solid and real. He didn't pray for forgiveness for my past. He didn't pray for judgment or answers or clarity about whether to leave. He prayed for me. He prayed that I would let go of the shame I'd been carrying, that I would see myself the way he'd come to see me, resilient, honest, strong. He prayed for wisdom for both of us and for courage to choose love over fear. When he finished, neither of us moved for a long moment. Then he stood, helped me up, and looked me straight in the eyes. I love who you are now, he said. Not who you were 5 years ago. I broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quiet tears sliding down my face as he pulled me into his arms, steady as ever. For the first time since his sister said the word proposal, my body stopped bracing for impact. After the prayer, everything felt unreal. Like the air in my apartment had shifted density and I hadn't quite adjusted to breathing in it yet. Matt went to the kitchen and poured us both glasses of water. I stayed on the couch, hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to keep myself from apologizing again. I'd already said it, over and over. Anything more would turn honesty into self-punishment. When he came back, he noticed the open cabinet almost immediately. Did you move things around? He asked gently. I shook my head. I threw something out today. He glanced at the trash can near the counter and saw the empty vodka bottle. His eyes flicked back to mine, not accusing, not alarmed. How long's it been? He asked. Years, I said quickly. I don't drink anymore. I just didn't want it here tonight. He nodded, like that made perfect sense. There aren't any solutions at the bottom of a bottle, he said quietly. My grandfather used to say that. Something about that, How easily he folded my fear into understanding made my throat tighten again. We sat there for a while, not touching the food, not rushing the moment. The tension didn't disappear, but it softened, like a knot that had been loosened enough to breathe around. "I need to ask you something," I said finally. "Okay. Does this change the way you see me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back against the couch, thinking. I appreciated that more than an immediate reassurance. "Honestly?" he said at last. I nodded. "It changes how I understand you," he said. "It explains things. The way you're hard on yourself. The way you don't believe people when they say you're enough." I looked down, my fingers twisting together. "But no," he continued. It doesn't make me love you less. It doesn't make me think you're dirty or broken or unworthy. If anything, it makes me respect how far you've come." The tears came again, this time faster. "I was so scared you'd judge me," I whispered. "I won't pretend it wasn't a shock," he said honestly. "It was. I need time to process it. Not because I'm questioning us, but because it's a lot. And I want to be thoughtful about it, not reactive." That felt fair, healthy, even. We finally ate the Thai food, cold but comforting. The mundanity of it, passing containers, laughing when I spilled rice on the couch, felt like a small miracle. Life, somehow, was continuing. Before he left that night, he held my face in his hands and kissed my forehead. "Thank you for telling me before the proposal," he said. That took courage. When the door closed behind him, I stood there for a long time, staring at it. I expected a crash afterward, regret, panics, the urge to rewind. Instead, I felt lighter. The next morning, he texted me early. "Want to take a walk at the park today?" We walked for hours, talking about everything except the video. He didn't avoid me, didn't pull away. If anything, he held my hand tighter. But uncertainty still lingered. The camping trip was still scheduled for the weekend. And somewhere between his calm acceptance and his thoughtful silence, a question pulsed quietly in my chest. Was he still going to propose? Or had my honesty quietly rewritten the future? I didn't ask. I told myself that whatever happened next, I'd already done the hardest part, choosing truth over fear. And if love survived that, then maybe it was real in a way I'd never experienced before. The days leading up to the camping trip felt like walking across a frozen lake. Everything looked solid, but I was hyper-aware of every step. Matt didn't pull away. That almost made it harder. He still texted me good morning. Still sent me photos of dumb things he saw during the day. A dog in a sweater, a crooked parking job, a meme about engineers that only half made sense to me. Still kissed me the same way when we met up for dinner midweek. Slow and familiar, like his body hadn't gotten the memo that my past was supposed to change things. But there was a new layer now, thoughtfulness, pauses. Not coldness, just depth. And I didn't know how to read it. His sister called me in a mild panic 2 days after the confession. "I totally ruined the surprise, didn't I?" she blurted out the second I picked up. "Matt hasn't said anything, but he's been quiet, and now I'm worried I messed everything up." I swallowed. "You didn't ruin anything," I said carefully. "Really?" She hesitated. "Is everything okay between you two?" "Yes," I said. And it was true, mostly. "We're good." After I hung up, I sat on my couch staring at the wall, wondering how many people unknowingly carry explosives into their relationships without ever knowing where they're hidden. I kept myself busy, too busy. I reorganized my apartment, rewashed clothes that were already clean, made lists I didn't need. I even Googled adult content takedown laws at 2 a.m, heart pounding, knowing full well that most of what I'd read before led to the same conclusion. Once something like that is online, it doesn't really go away. The video was still out there. Matt hadn't asked to see it, hadn't asked for details, hadn't even said the word film again. That silence was kindness, but it also gave my anxiety room to run wild. What if he was processing quietly and planning to pull away slowly? What if he proposed out of habit or guilt instead of certainty? What if he didn't propose at all, and this weekend became the beginning of the end? Friday night, I packed for the trip with shaking hands. Hiking boots, sweater, pajamas. The ring I suspected was sitting in a drawer somewhere at his place hovered in my mind like a ghost. When Matt picked me up early Saturday morning, he was smiling, real, unforced. "You ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. We drove for over an hour, windows down, our road trip playlist filling the car. We talked about normal things. Work deadlines, his volunteer plans, a restaurant we wanted to try next month. It was almost surreal how ordinary it felt. About halfway there, he pulled off at a scenic overlook. "Can we stop for a minute?" he asked. "I want to stretch." The air was cool and smelled like pine. Morning mist curled low over the valley below, softening the mountains into watercolor shapes. We leaned against the railing, quiet. Then Matt reached for my hand. "I was going to wait," he said suddenly. My heart stuttered. "But after this week, I don't want to." He turned toward me, and then he got down on one knee. Time didn't slow down. It disappeared. He told me later that this wasn't the original plan, that there had been something more elaborate planned for the campsite. But after my confession, after choosing honesty before certainty, he didn't want a performance. He wanted truth. He told me that marriage wasn't about spotless histories. It was about choosing each other with open eyes, about knowing the worst parts and deciding to build anyway. When he opened the ring box, my hands flew to my mouth. The ring was simple, elegant, perfectly him, perfectly us. I said yes through tears so heavy they blurred the mountains behind him. The rest of the weekend felt like stepping into a new version of reality. We cooked over the campfire, hiked until our legs ached, talked about where we wanted to live, how we'd handle money, what kind of parents we might want to be someday. Not once did he bring up my past again. On the second night, I did. "Are you really okay?" I asked softly, lying beside him in the tent. "With everything I told you?" He turned toward me, his face lit faintly by the lantern glow. "The past is the past," he said simply. "What matters is who you are now, and who we're choosing to be together." For the first time in years, I slept without waking up in fear. When we got back, the escalation didn't stop. His parents were thrilled. His mother immediately started talking about venues, dates, colors. My parents cried happy tears when Matt told them he'd asked my dad for his blessing weeks earlier. They had no idea what I'd confessed, or how close I'd come to losing everything. And yet, beneath the joy, something else stirred. Because secrets don't disappear just because you tell the person you love. They wait. And somewhere out there, someone else still had access to mine. Happiness didn't erase the past. It just made the shadow sharper. After the engagement, glow faded into something calmer, something steadier. I started noticing how quiet my mind became at night. Not peaceful, empty in a way that felt like waiting. I'd lie awake beside Matt, listening to his breathing, even when he wasn't there, my brain replaying the same thought over and over. The video still exists. It didn't matter that Matt knew. It didn't matter that he'd chosen me anyway. There was still a version of me frozen in time, accessible to strangers, detached from the woman I'd fought to become. Some nights I caught myself imagining the worst. A coworker recognizing me, a church acquaintance whispering, someone sending Matt a link like a grenade with a bow on it. I hated that fear still had access to me. Wedding planning should have been joyful, but I moved through it carefully, like I didn't quite trust the ground beneath my feet. I smiled at friends. I laughed at jokes. I said all the right things. But inside, there was a quiet question that kept circling. How long before this comes back to punish me? The answer arrived on a Tuesday afternoon at work. I was sorting patient files when my phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. The message was short. A screenshot. My face. Younger. Softer. A different name under it. Underneath, just 4 words. "Isn't this you?" My vision tunneled. The room tilted. I locked myself in the bathroom stall and stared at the screen, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. A second message came through. "Wait until your fiancé sees this." My body went cold in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with memory. That old, familiar shame surged up, sharp and suffocating. I sat on the closed toilet lid and pressed my forehead against the metal stall wall, breathing in short, shallow bursts. This was it. The thing I'd been bracing for. The universe reminding me that past choices don't vanish just because you've paid for them emotionally. For a few seconds, I considered not telling Matt, handling it myself, protecting him from the ugliness. Then I remembered kneeling beside my couch while he prayed for my peace. I typed back with trembling fingers. He already knows. We dealt with this months ago. There was no response. Minutes passed, then hours. Finally, just one word appeared. "Oh, that was it." No threats, no follow-up. I blocked the number immediately, but the damage was already done. When I got home that evening, Matt knew something was wrong the second he saw my face. I showed him the messages without saying a word. His reaction stunned me. He wasn't disappointed. He wasn't shaken. He was angry, but not at me. "That's messed up," he said flatly. "Are you okay?" That question, "Are you okay?" hit harder than any accusation could have. He deleted the messages from my phone himself, handed it back to me, and pulled me into his chest. "This," he said quietly, "is exactly why I'm glad you told me first." But that night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the fear creeping back in, because I realized something terrifying. Even if Matt stood beside me forever, even if love survived everything, I still hadn't forgiven myself. And until I did, the past would always know where to find me. That was the lowest point. Not the threat, not the shame, not the fear of exposure. It was the realization that the person still holding the sharpest knife against my throat was me. The turning point didn't arrive with a confrontation or a dramatic revelation. It arrived quietly, on a Thursday night, while Matt was washing dishes and humming under his breath like nothing in the world was wrong. I watched him from the couch, the warm kitchen light outlining his shoulders, and something shifted inside me. Not relief, not happiness. Clarity. I realized that for years, I'd been waiting for someone else to decide whether I was allowed to move on. First my parents, then strangers on the internet, then Matt. And now, a faceless number trying to scare me back into silence. But the truth was brutal and liberating at the same time. They didn't have that power anymore, unless I handed it back. That night, I told Matt something I hadn't even admitted to myself. I don't think I've ever actually forgiven myself, I said, my voice quiet but steady. He dried his hands and came to sit beside me. What would that look like? He asked. I thought about it, really thought. It would look like not flinching every time my phone buzzes, not waiting for punishment, not believing I deserved to be exposed because I was desperate once. He nodded slowly. Then that's the work, he said. Not erasing the past, but refusing to live inside it. The next morning, we took action, not out of fear, but out of agency. We researched legal options together, not promises, not miracles, just steps. A lawyer explained the reality honestly. Complete removal wasn't guaranteed, but there were things we could do. Takedown requests, notices, barriers. For the first time, I wasn't hiding from the problem. I was standing in front of it. As the process began, something unexpected happened. The fear lost its sharpness. It didn't vanish, but it stopped owning me. Wedding planning continued. We chose a small venue, a renovated barn with open beams and soft light. April. Simple, warm, honest. One evening, while looking at dates, Matt said something that stayed with me. Your past doesn't disqualify you from a future, he said. It prepared you to appreciate it. I started believing him, not because he said it, but because I felt it. The turning point wasn't Matt's forgiveness. It was mine. The fallout didn't look like public humiliation or whispered scandals. It looked like silence. The number that had threatened me never contacted me again. No follow-up, no escalation, no dramatic exposure, just nothing. And in that nothing, I learned something important. Power only works when someone is afraid to lose. Whoever had tried to scare me lost interest the moment they realized there was nothing left to leverage. That alone felt like victory. Matt and I decided to move our wedding date up. Not because we were running from anything, but because neither of us wanted to live in limbo. Early April felt right. Close enough to feel real. Far enough to plan without panic. When we went to pick out our wedding bands, I expected another wave of doubt. Instead, I felt grounded. As I slid a simple gold ring onto my finger, I thought about how different this felt from the engagement ring. Not more exciting, but deeper. Like a promise made with open eyes. We didn't tell many people about the threat. There was no need. The past had tried to claw its way into our present and failed. What did ripple outward, slowly, quietly, was the consequence of my honesty. Matt's trust in me became unshakable, not because I was perfect, but because I was transparent. And I changed too. I stopped apologizing for my existence. When someone asked invasive questions about my past, I learned to say, "That's not something I share," without guilt. When old shame surfaced, I noticed it instead of obeying it. The truth didn't destroy my life. It protected it. The only real fallout landed on the person who tried to hurt me. Their threat collapsed the moment it met a foundation built on honesty. There was no dramatic revenge, just irrelevance. And that was enough. A few weeks ago, Matt and I moved into our new apartment. It's nothing glamorous. Thin walls, uneven cabinets, a balcony that barely fits 2 chairs. But it's ours. The first night we slept there, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, I lay awake listening to the city hum outside and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on everything going right. The solid kind that comes from knowing the truth and living in it. The video from my past still exists somewhere on the internet. That fact hasn't changed. What has changed is its power over me. It no longer defines my worth, my relationship, or my future. It's a chapter, nothing more. Matt still keeps his grandfather's Bible in the nightstand. I still don't go to church. And somehow that works, because our relationship was never built on perfection or matching beliefs. It was built on honesty, accountability, and grace. If there's one lesson I've learned from all of this, it's this. Secrets don't protect love, they only protect fear. Telling the truth didn't cost me my relationship. Keeping it might have. We spend so much time trying to outrun our past, believing that if we're quiet enough, good enough, careful enough, it won't catch us. But the past doesn't need chasing. It waits. And the only way to disarm it is to face it with someone who chooses you anyway. I don't know what challenges Matt and I will face next. Marriage doesn't come with guarantees, only commitments. But I know this, whatever comes, we'll meet it without hiding. I'm no longer running from who I was. I'm building a life with who I am now. And for the first time, that feels like freedom.